They drove away from suburban life with nothing but a truck, a shared dream, and a plan that most people around them thought would fail. Dennis and Amy, the couple behind Holdfast Alaska, didn't just move to the wilderness. They built a homestead from scratch in one of the most remote and unforgiving corners of the United States, with no power grid, no running water, and temperatures that routinely dropped to 40 below zero. By the time most people discovered their channel, Dennis and Amy had already survived multiple Alaskan winters that would have sent the average person straight back south. What this video is going to give you is the full picture, where they actually came from, what it genuinely took to build what they've built, the details most other coverage never surfaces, and what their life looks like right now in the middle of 2026, when the channel is growing faster than at any point in its 5-year history. Dennis and Amy did not grow up in Alaska. That is the first thing most people miss when they find the channel. The assumption is that people living that deep in the wilderness must have roots there, some family connection, some childhood spent hunting or trapping or working the land through hard seasons. That is not their story. Their background was suburban, comfortable even. They were the kind of people who could have kept living the way most Americans live, in a house in a neighborhood with a grocery store down the road, a job that came with a predictable schedule, and a retirement plan somewhere in the distance. They chose to walk away from all of it, and they chose it with clear eyes. The decision didn't happen overnight. From what Dennis and Amy have shared across their videos, the pull toward Alaska and toward off-grid life built gradually over years. There was a growing discomfort with how far removed daily life had become from actual survival skills, from knowing how to feed yourself and your family without a supply chain, from understanding where food comes from and how to preserve it through a long winter. That discomfort eventually became a plan, and that plan became a move to interior Alaska's Copper River Basin, one of the most demanding environments in North America. The Copper River Basin is not a casual destination. It sits in south-central Alaska, carved by one of the most powerful rivers on the North American continent. It is bear country, wolf country, the kind of place where the seasons don't ease in gradually. They arrive hard and they stay. Winters in that region regularly hit -40 Fahrenheit and below. Roads close, machines fail in the cold. Equipment that functions fine in a temperate climate seizes up or breaks down when the temperature drops far enough. Every system you depend on has to be either hand-built or hand-repaired, because there is no calling a technician out to a remote Alaskan homestead in the middle of January. You figure it out, or you go without. Those are the only two options available. Dennis and Amy understood all of this before they went. That preparation, that refusal to romanticize what they were getting into, is one of the things that genuinely sets them apart in the off-grid content space. They don't sell Alaska as beautiful scenery, with occasional inconveniences. They document it as the hard, physical, genuinely demanding life that it is. The cold is real in their videos. The exhaustion is real. The satisfaction of solving a difficult problem with your own hands, in a place where no one is coming to help you, is also real. And that combination is what their audience keeps returning for, season after season, year after year. But here's the part that changes everything about what you just heard. Starting a homestead from scratch isn't just a lifestyle adjustment. It is a full construction project, a food production operation, an animal husbandry program, and a survival challenge, all running simultaneously, often in the same week. Most people who romanticize off-grid life imagine arriving somewhere and simply living off the land. What Dennis and Amy actually did was arrive somewhere and build the infrastructure needed to survive off the land, piece by piece, season by season, often in temperatures that made the physical labor genuinely punishing. Their cabin didn't come pre-built. They constructed it themselves. Their food supply doesn't come from a store. It comes from a fish wheel on the Copper River, from hunting moose and caribou during subsistence season, from foraging mushrooms and berries across the Alaskan backcountry, and from a homestead garden that has to produce enough in a short growing window to carry them through months of frozen ground. Every system, water, heat, food, shelter, exists because Dennis and Amy built it or figured it out through their own labor and their own capacity to solve problems under difficult conditions. Water alone is worth dwelling on for a moment because it is one of the most underappreciated challenges in remote Alaskan homesteading. In a regular house, water comes out of a tap whenever you need it. At their homestead, water is a physical operation requiring planning and sustained daily effort. In a 2026 video, they documented hauling over 8,000 gallons of water by hand to get through winter. Not 8,000 gallons delivered to a tank by a truck. 8,000 gallons moved, container by container, by two people living in a place where everything is harder and heavier when the temperature drops well below zero. That single logistical reality captures something essential about the difference between the idea of off-grid living and the actual daily experience of it. What most people following the channel don't fully register is that this kind of labor happens every single season, not just in the dramatic moments that make for compelling thumbnails. The firewood has to be cut, split, and stacked before winter, and in interior Alaska, that means months of sustained preparation for a season that can last half a year. The animals have to be fed and watered every day regardless of temperature or weather conditions. The food preservation work happens on the harvest schedule, not yours. Dennis and Amy have never framed any of this as extraordinary. They document it as Tuesday. What happened next is the reason this story spread across the internet. The fish wheel is one of the most distinctive parts of their operation, and one of the most misunderstood by viewers new to Alaskan subsistence living. A fish wheel is a traditional rotating device anchored in a river current that catches fish as they swim upstream. Dennis and Amy use one on the Copper River during salmon season to harvest sockeye, their primary protein source for the entire year. In a single documented stretch in summer 2025, they pulled in over 100 salmon in 48 hours. That fish has to be processed, dried, smoked, canned, and frozen immediately. There is no refrigeration delay in subsistence living. You work the harvest when the river gives it to you, around the clock if necessary, because the salmon run does not pause for convenience. The processing operation that follows a large harvest is its own significant labor event. In 2025, Dennis and Amy documented processing 103 salmon in a single session. Every fish filleted, every piece of the animal accounted for. The channel has documented using the whole salmon, including frames and bones reduced for broth, a traditional practice that reflects the subsistence philosophy at the core of what they do. In their operation, waste is genuinely not an option. The food that comes out of the Copper River in summer is the food that carries them through the following February. Beyond salmon, their subsistence hunting operation covers moose, caribou, and grouse. A successful moose harvest in fall provides hundreds of pounds of protein that has to be processed in the field, transported out of the backcountry, and properly stored before temperatures drop. The 2025 Moose Camp content documented a multi-day operation deep in Alaskan terrain, glassing for animals, field dressing in place, packing meat out on foot. That is not a weekend hunting trip with a truck waiting at the trailhead. That is a professional-level subsistence operation run by two people who built the skills entirely from scratch. In June 2026, the fish wheel was lost on the Copper River. Losing a fish wheel directly affects how much food they can put up before winter arrives. Their response was immediate. Within days, they were rebuilding. By late June, the new wheel was back in the river. By early July, they were filming salmon camp footage on the Copper again. The lost wheel became 2 videos, the rebuild became a 3rd, and the audience watched every step of it without looking away. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. The animal side of Holdfast Alaska is something most coverage underplays significantly. Dennis and Amy don't just hunt and fish. They raise goats, dairy animals that add an entire food production layer to their operation that doesn't depend on hunting season or river timing. In early 2026, they were managing births in temperatures that hit -40 degrees. Newborn animals requiring warmth, colostrum, and constant attention, in conditions cold enough to cause frostbite on exposed human skin within minutes. They built a dedicated winter barn before that season arrived. They managed midnight kiddings in the middle of an Alaskan January, present and working through the night because the animals don't schedule themselves around human convenience, and because the survival of each animal matters to the food system they've built. In February 2026, they documented turning fresh goat milk into cheese. In a homestead context, that is not a hobbyist side project. That is adding another food category to their self-sufficient supply chain that doesn't require driving hundreds of miles to a store. Every food production system they add reduces their dependence on those long supply hauls, which are expensive, time-consuming, and increasingly difficult in deep winter conditions. A 2025 video documented a single supply run that covered 600 miles of Alaskan road. One trip just to collect necessary materials and run repairs on equipment that couldn't wait. The pack string development that began in early 2026 is one of the most significant signals of where their operation is heading. They began acquiring and training pack horses during the winter and spring months. Pack horses are used in backcountry Alaska to haul equipment and harvested game out of terrain that no vehicle can reach. In April 2026, they filmed their first bareback rides on the animals. By May, the horses were integrated into homestead work. A dedicated barn was constructed for the pack string during the expansion projects, already running concurrently with the second cabin build. Adding working pack horses means Holdfast Alaska can now reach backcountry terrain that most people living in interior Alaska never access on foot or by machine. That is not a minor upgrade to their operation. That is a permanent expansion of what they are capable of doing in the wilderness they have chosen to build their life in. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. The channel launched in February 2021. As of July 2026, Holdfast Alaska has crossed 238,000 subscribers and sits above 35.8 million total views. The growth trajectory in mid-2026 stands out by any measure. Between mid-June and mid-July 2026 alone, the channel added 26,000 subscribers and pulled in nearly 4.7 million views in a single 30-day period. That is not a channel coasting at its baseline. That is a channel hitting a real inflection point, and the timing aligns directly with their summer salmon season content. Fish wheel footage and Copper River camp videos that pull in new viewers who find one clip and stay considerably longer than they plan to. A consistent question across their comment sections is some version of, how does this actually work financially? It is a reasonable question to sit with. Off-grid life in remote Alaska is not free. Fuel for the generator costs real money. Equipment replacement costs real money. Livestock costs real money. That 600-mile supply run involves significant transportation expense, and it happens multiple times a year. Their homestead is not funded by a prior windfall that never gets mentioned on camera. It operates, at least in part, on income generated by the channel itself. A YouTube channel pulling nearly 4.7 million views in a single month, in the outdoor and homesteading niche which commands solid advertiser CPM rates, generates meaningful revenue. That income is part of what funds the supply runs, the equipment, the construction materials, and the ongoing expansion of the operation year over year. Dennis and Amy have not made a dedicated video breaking this down in detail, but the pattern is visible in 5 years of consistent uploads, growing production quality, and an operation that has never contracted, only expanded, every single season. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got, until now. The lesser-known dimension of Holdfast Alaska is how deliberately Amy's content connects to traditional Alaskan food practice. Most homesteading channels document food preservation as modern DIY dressed up in vintage aesthetics. Amy's approach is fundamentally different. She consistently reaches back to methods that predate industrial food systems by generations, and she documents the reasoning behind each one, not just the steps involved. In early 2025, she documented making a sourdough starter using a method she described as over 100 years old. No measuring tools, no written recipe, just technique adapted to her specific conditions in interior Alaska. In spring 2026, she documented making birch syrup from trees on their land, a labor-intensive process that requires far more sap per gallon than maple syrup production. She documented elderberry syrup production using a traditional method in early 2026. The foraging content covers birch bark, cottonwood, and wild mushrooms not as aesthetic interests, but as practical food and material resources that serve real functions on the homestead. The salmon content sits in the same category. The drying and smoking methods Amy uses connect directly to how people have preserved fish in this region for generations. In a 2025 video, she documented a 5-day fish camp on the Copper River where the entire preservation operation was run the traditional way. Fire, smoke, time, and knowledge that goes back long before refrigeration existed anywhere in Alaska. That is a different category of content than most people in the homesteading space are producing, and it has built a distinct secondary audience of viewers who are specifically seeking that depth of traditional knowledge. She never talked about all of this in one place publicly, until now. The most significant detail to emerge from Holdfast Alaska's 2026 content appeared quietly in their July upload schedule. A video about building a fish wheel, not for their personal homestead, but for their village, signals something important about how deeply Dennis and Amy have become embedded in the place where they live. In remote Alaskan communities, subsistence living is not an individual practice. It is a shared system rooted in relationships between neighbors, in collective knowledge passed between people who depend on the same land and the same water for their survival. The fact that Dennis and Amy are now building infrastructure for the community around them, contributing to the subsistence capacity of the people they live near, indicates that they have moved well past the stage of newcomers trying to survive a winter. They have become part of the fabric of the place. That transition does not happen through content strategy or smart upload scheduling. It happens through years of showing up, doing the work, learning the land, and being present through hard seasons alongside the same people. The fish wheel they built for their village in July 2026 is not a feel-good story for the channel. It is evidence of a relationship between two people and a community that now runs deep enough to matter in both directions. And that's when the decision was made, the one nobody around them saw coming. 5 years ago, Dennis and Amy were suburban people with a plan that most people considered unrealistic. Today, they are building fish wheels for their Alaskan neighbors, training pack horses for remote backcountry terrain, raising dairy animals through -40 winters, and growing a YouTube channel at a pace that most creators with twice their subscriber count would respect. The suburban life they walked away from is not something the channel ever mourns. What they are building is larger in every way that matters. Pull back and look at the full scope of what is running simultaneously at Holdfast Alaska in 2026. They are building a second cabin, an active construction project with floor beams and foundation work completed in sub-zero temperatures over the winter months. They are managing a dairy goat herd including breeding cycles, winter kidding, and cheese production. They are training a working pack horse string for backcountry access. They are operating a fish wheel subsistence system on the Copper River through salmon season. They are running a diesel generator power system they designed and installed themselves. They are maintaining and expanding a greenhouse that sustained winter damage and was rebuilt before planting season. They are foraging across multiple seasons, spring birchwork, summer mushrooms, fall berries, winter traditional materials. They are hunting during subsistence season for large game. And they are producing consistent video content across all of it, uploading regularly, and growing their audience at the fastest rate in the channel's 5-year history. The relationship dynamic between Dennis and Amy through all of this is worth naming directly. They are not performing partnership on camera. They are two people with genuinely distinct skill sets, Dennis driving the construction, mechanical problem solving, and hunting work. Amy driving the food preservation, traditional knowledge, and animal management, whose individual contributions are both necessary to the operation at a fundamental level. What comes through when both of them are on screen is the particular ease that develops between two people who have been through real difficulty together and are still building toward the same goal. That is harder to manufacture than good lighting, and the audience has been responding to it for 5 years because they can feel the difference between something real and something performed. As of July 2026, the channel is posting weekly, and the content calendar for the rest of the year is already visible in what they're building. Salmon season carries summer. The second cabin and the backcountry pack horse work will drive fall content. Winter will bring the temperatures that define what Holdfast Alaska is about. The -40 nights, the wood stove management through a blizzard, the newborn animals in the cold, the long supply hauls across frozen Alaskan road. And Amy's traditional food and foraging content will keep building the secondary audience that has formed specifically around what she brings to the channel. The truth about Dennis and Amy from Holdfast Alaska is not one single dramatic revelation. It is something more durable than that. What they have built is proof that a particular kind of commitment, made deliberately, without illusions about the cost, and sustained through 5 years of physical difficulty in one of the most demanding environments in North America, can produce something real. They left comfort behind and built capability. They filmed the failures alongside the wins. They let the hard parts stay hard on camera, and they kept going through every setback without making it a performance. Now they are building fish wheels for their neighbors and teaching traditional food methods to hundreds of thousands of people who will never set foot in interior Alaska. What comes next for Holdfast Alaska is more building, more seasons, more cold, and more of the earned authenticity that has turned a channel about subsistence living on Alaska's Copper River into one of the fastest-growing homesteading operations in the United States in the summer of 2026. Dennis and Amy left behind everything that most people consider essential to a comfortable modern life to build something most people would call impossible. 5 years in, they are still building, and now they are building for their community, not just themselves. The question worth sitting with is this: if you had to walk away from every modern convenience you rely on right now, do you think you could build what Dennis and Amy built? Or is the life they're living in interior Alaska something that most people could simply never sustain long-term? Drop your honest answer in the comments below.